Hey guys, it's Ed and Melissa, and we are just popping in either before or after this episode because
It's before. We're popping in before.
we're popping in before your episode if you're watching on YouTube because Melissa messed up a little.
Do you want to explain what you did, Melissa?
We have been playing with different layouts like Exhibit A, Exhibit B, so on and so forth. And we did this fun one because we thought it would be different.
With the goal of debuting it in 2025 with some new
It's going to be new
features.
and exciting. 2025, new year, new me, new layout.
Now it's weird.
And then I forgot to change it back to this, and we remembered as soon as we clicked end recording. So, this is a very special preview of our new layout.
So the picture's going to be down here. Which way are you going to point for a picture?
Up
That way.
here.
No.
Or this way. We're
that
like
way.
the Brady Bunch.
That way.
Or we could do this.
Oh, man.
Or this.
Crazy.
So many options.
Crazy.
But anyway, enjoy the show.
And why would we put that after the show if we're trying to explain the new form?
We can put it wherever we want. It's our show.
Oh, God. So the guy got to choose how he wanted to go out?
Yeah, so this case I'm going to cover, he got to pick, he was sentenced to death, and he got to pick if he wanted to go in the electric chair or if he wanted lethal injection.
Ooh, so those were the only two. Like you didn't get to.
Yeah.
It's not like whatever.
No.
It's not like a whatever you want.
I wish it was like a grab bag. Like pick the paper out of the hat.
Oh man, maybe you get a good one. Oh, lethal injection. Yes.
Yes.
Ooh, guillotine.
The guillotine freaks me out because isn't like your head still alive for like a couple seconds after?
It is, but they haven't used it since like 1492.
Nuh-uh, they used it. No, they used it in like France in the 70s.
The 1970s?
Yes, like the 1970s. Like I think it was like 1976. It was like whatever year that Star Wars came out.
Wow. Well, if that's true, I was just a little bit off. And also, isn't that the year Columbus sailed the ocean blue?
1492. Yes.
So stupid.
33, 1, 0. Main event of the evening. Wednesday and
It's Tuesday, and you're listening to Murder Unscripted.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Murder Unscripted, the podcast that immerses you in the true crime genre like never before. I'm your host, Ed Hydock, along with me, as always, the one and only Melissa Spivey.
The one and only, because we've decided we couldn't handle anymore.
No, one is just fine. So for everybody that's been following along, we're spending December recapping all of the blocks that we've covered so far. Melissa walked us through the Jamie Shearer case as part of our look at bodiless crimes. Then last week, she told us about the horrific murder committed by Richard Biegenwald, the Jersey Shore thrill killer, in our throwback to our block on, wait for it, thrill killers.
What? Didn't see that one coming.
Clever, right? Our creativity knows no bounds. This week, I am going to harken back to our block on the wrongfully suspected and tell you an absolutely outrageous story out of Boston, Massachusetts. And while this case does have one or two people who are wrongfully suspected, it's more about an entire community who was under the radar and suffered some pretty shitty treatment because of one idiot who thought he could outsmart the entire city.
This case is wild from what you've like. It's recently been in the news without giving too much away, so I'm somewhat familiar with it, but not the ins and outs of it.
Well, and it's weird because when I found it, I had never heard of it. I didn't know it was in the news until I found it. And then it was like, oh man, this is going to be kind of poignant because it's within a year something bigger came out regarding the case, and it might be kind of timely actually.
Definitely.
Let's get right into it. And Melissa, for this story, Time Machine is going to need every ounce of juice it can muster because we have to go all the way back to Beantown in 1989. I was 9 for reference at this time.
I was 1, so clearly I had no idea what was going on back then. Not that I do know now, but I do know how to use Google. So here we go. Buckle up. Beep boop, beep boop, beep boop, beep boop,
That was going back those extra years to 1989.
beep boop, beep. Exactly. Maybe we took a detour, went to the wrong year. We had to back up, reverse.
We're in 1492.
And we're using the guillotine. Well, we are in 1989, and the top movie that year was Batman with Michael Keaton, Jack Nicholson, and the lovely Kim Basinger. Which, did you know that her birthday is today that we're recording?
I did not know that. Why would I know that?
I don't know, but I know random things, and I knew that. So,
I don't
happy
know if
birthday,
you
Kim
did.
Basinger.
But
The top song of 1989 was Look Away by Chicago, which I had to like listen to it because I couldn't hear it in my head.
yeah,
But
Chicago got weird around that time. They used to be awesome when they
yeah,
were Chicago Transit Authority, but when they became Chicago, they got soft, real
yeah,
soft. Yeah.
it's true. Well, the song of the summer that year was Right Here Waiting by the
Oh,
God
Richard
Among
Marx.
Men himself, Richard Marx.
He had some
Oh,
hair.
I'm swooning. Love him. He's another one of my random crushes.
Oh, God.
Oh my gosh, do you know what the like biggest toy that year was, like in electronics news and everything?
Simon.
No, Nintendo's Game Boy.
Oh, Game Boy. I guess Simon would have been older.
Probably, yeah, I feel like that was early 80s. But yeah, the Game Boy came out, which was like huge. Now we have Switches and all that other stuff.
Well, it's funny you say that because the Switch, you can actually, so I have Nintendo Switch Online where you can actually play all of the old Super Nintendo, Nintendo, and Game Boy games on the Switch. So same graphics, same everything. It's an
All right, you need
emulator.
to show me how to do that after we're done because I have
I
a
will.
Switch and I don't really know how to do anything on it. I got it like 2 years ago.
It's going to cost you $49.99 a year, but you can do it.
Oh, I think I can swing it. But in actual news that doesn't include movies or songs, November 1989, we saw the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Hmm.
And in true crime news, on January 24th, 1989, Ted Bundy was put to death in the electric chair.
Oh, they saved his brain, didn't they, for science?
Did they? I didn't know
Mhm.
that. He looked
Yeah.
rough. I mean,
Oh,
obviously
yeah.
you're gonna look rough after you're electrocuted, but he looked rough.
It was awesome to see pictures of him there. I'd never thought they would exist.
I know, that's crazy, but that is our trip back to 1989. Beep boop, beep boop.
I don't even know why I like bother to spend money or time on sound effects because I don't know, you're like the Michael Winslow, that guy from Police Academy who did all the sound effects.
Did he make that song that's like do 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 do?
No.
No?
He didn't do sound
Oh,
he
that's
didn't
Beverly Hills
that's
Cop. Ah, oops. I knew it was something about Police Academy, Beverly Hills Cop, whatevs.
Anyway, so while all of those things may have been going on in 1989, you want to know what's going on in Boston?
Do I?
There was a much bigger issue that you did not touch on, and that's basically the systematic racism against Black people. And it's what our story is going to focus on today. I went looking for stories that had a wrongfully accused person, and this story popped out to me. So it's not so much about one person, but this entire community because this is a hard hitting story. So here we go. It's the bitter cold evening of October 23rd, 1989, when Boston police receive a disturbing 911 call from 29-year-old Charles Stuart. In a panicked voice from his car phone. You remember those, Moz? Car phone?
Like a bag phone? Linda had one of those. It was like $500 a minute.
No, no, this was in your car. You picked it up and it was physically mounted in your car.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
fancy. Bougie like intercoms.
You had money if you had a car phone. So on his car phone, Charles tells the dispatcher that he and his wife Carol were stopped in their car in the Mission Hill neighborhood where they were ambushed and shot. His wife in the head and Charles in the abdomen.
State Police Boston recorded an emergency 510.
My wife's been shot. I've been shot.
Where is this, sir?
I have no idea. I'm off. I've been coming from Tremont, Brigham and Women's Hospital.
Two shooting victims in Tremont Street area in Boston.
Are you in the city of Boston, though?
Yes.
Can you give me any indication where you might be? Any buildings?
No.
Okay, has your wife been shot as well?
Yes. In the head.
In the head?
Yeah, I ducked down.
How long ago did you leave Brigham and Women's, sir? In what direction did you leave?
2 minutes, 3 minutes. Oh, man.
3 minutes from Brigham and Women's Center.
Oh, man.
Okay, sir, bear with me now. Stand by. Stay on the phone with me. What's your name, sir?
Stuart, Chuck Stuart. Oh, man.
Hang in, Chuck. Come on with me now. Chuck, I need you to help me a little bit, and I'll get assistance to you right away. We're on the way, Chuck. Chuck.
Yeah.
Can you,
man, I'm going to pass out.
can you open the door? Can you open the window?
I'm blanking out.
You can't blank out on me. I need you, man. Chuck.
Interested. My wife is stopped burgling. She stopped breathing.
Chuck, I'm going to get assistance to you, buddy.
And get this, while Charles was on the phone with State Police dispatcher Gary McLaughlin, Charles couldn't exactly pinpoint where he was because he said he actually drove a little bit away from the crime scene after the shooting.
Where are you right now, sir? Can you indicate to me?
No, I don't know. He made us go to an abandoned area.
Okay, sir. Can you see out the windows? Can you tell me where you are, please?
No. I don't know. I don't see any signs. Oh, God.
So in order to find Charles's car, McLaughlin instructs every officer that's in the responding area to kind of turn off their sirens. Normally you'd have your sirens on when you respond to a scene. So he'd turn off your sirens, and then one by one, he had the guys turn on their sirens, and he would actually listen through Charles's phone because he was on the line with him, which car was the closest and how they could find him. So they kind of tracked it with like echolocation almost.
Negative. Negative on the sirens. They're putting on individual sirens.
Route 2 on your sirens on. No siren there. No, we're not getting anything now. Bravo 2-1, shut off your siren. Bravo K1, sound your siren.
Not yet, no siren.
Bravo K1, shut off your siren. Bravo 1-4, sound your siren. You're right there, right on top of them. We hear the siren, loud, real loud, right there.
That's awesome. Like, that's so cool. And I mean, I guess they didn't have any sort of GPS then, and like you couldn't pinpoint the car phone. If you could, I'm sure it probably took like weeks and weeks to get that information back.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I know OnStar probably wasn't a thing.
No.
So this next part is actually pretty incredible to me. So Melissa, do you remember the show Rescue 911? William Shatner was the host.
I've definitely heard of the show, but I didn't know William Shatner hosted it. And I don't know why, but I think that's hilarious. Like, pretty much everything I know about William Shatner comes straight from the Big Bang Theory. So I'm just imagining him in his Captain Kirk outfit.
He was like the host. And it was very similar. I guess Cops is the best kind of comparison I can make, but with emergency personnel. So you'd have a host describing what's happening, and then they'd cut to this run and gun style follow along filming. It was really kind of innovative and pretty awesome. But Rescue 911 was actually riding along with Boston Emergency Medical Services when this call came in about Charles Stuart, from Charles Stuart. So they filmed the entire thing, and they shot some pretty incredible footage of the couple being extracted from the car.
Wow.
Yeah, one of the biggest things. This story is going to turn out to be one of the biggest things that's ever happened in Boston. And Rescue 911 just happened to be there filming.
I got out of the ambulance, grabbed some equipment, made my way over to the driver's side of the car, which was closest to me. My partner Dan went around to the other side to attend to the woman.
Stay back. Get the mask, Danny.
She had a substantial amount of injury to her head and was in cardiac arrest at that time.
Charles, he's in the ambulance and he's got a really strained voice from all of this, but he manages to tell the EMTs that the shooter was a young African American man with a raspy voice, and he was wearing a tracksuit. Picture like an Adidas felt jumpsuit, right? But unfortunately, he didn't get a good look at the man's face.
See who did this? Who did this? Out of the way. Black man. One guy? Two guys?
He was very conversant and lucid and giving the Boston police officers quite a bit of information about what had transpired. And I was impressed with how much detail and how much recall he had, considering what he had been through.
Right, what do you look like?
Black male, what do you have on for clothing, remember?
You're playing the partner there, but you want to get all over it. Black, any stripes on it? What color? Red? Did he have beard, mustache?
Homicide, please.
You don't remember?
All right, wait. So did the guy steal anything, or he just like shot them and fled? Like, what was the point of it?
He did. So Charles also did tell the dispatcher that the man did rob him as well. So that must have been the motive. So both Charles and Carol are rushed to the hospital and they meet police there. Immediately, the detectives notice something suspicious. So not only is Carol clinging to life, but she's also very pregnant. Like we're talking 7 months pregnant with the couple's first child. So, and that's something that Charles didn't even bother to kind of mention during the 911 call. And it was also noted that Charles never once like spoke to Carol during the 911 call. He kind of described what was going on. And I think at one point he mentioned she was not gurgling anymore or something, but he never like addressed her or talked to her other than telling the dispatcher she was shot. So stick a pin in that for a minute.
I'm not loving this, Charles, but he could be in shock. So we have to, I'm going to reserve judgment. Well, I already judged him, actually, but I will reserve my judgmental comments.
You prejudged
him. But I'm
him,
not loving this, Charles.
This turns out dramatically different than you think. So before I get into Charles, I will tell you that Carol's injuries were too much to overcome. She was pronounced dead at 2:50 a.m., pretty much the second she arrived at the hospital. And doctors performed an emergency C-section and were able to actually pull out baby Christopher William. That's what they named him. And he was 9 weeks premature, though. And things weren't looking good. So they had him baptized right there in the ICU. And he suffered just so much trauma. He actually passed away about, I think it was like 17 days later. Turned out, so about 2 weeks. So back to the night this all happened. So Charles's injuries were not nearly as severe as his wife. He was treated for some intestinal trauma, but nothing life-threatening. He ended up being in there till like December. So we're at the end of October. So I would say about 6 weeks. So once Charles was stable and able to speak, he kind of elaborated to officers about what happened earlier that night. Charles tells the officers that he and his wife spent the evening at Lamaze classes at Brigham and Women's Hospital. And on their way home, they drove through the Roxbury neighborhood in their blue Toyota Cressida? I've never heard that kind of car before.
Never heard of that.
But regardless, while they were stopped, a gunman rushed up to their vehicle, forced his way inside, and told Charles to start driving. So Charles did as he was instructed. And when they got to a red light in the city's Mission Hill neighborhood, which was right next to Roxbury, where they just were, it was the next town over, the gunman opened fire. He fled the vehicle and basically disappeared into the night.
That sounds weird, but okay.
Well, Charles' story was believable to police. The way his demeanor, it all made sense. And before we get into the actual investigation, I want to give you a little bit of victimology on Charles and Carol. So Charles and Carol had been married for 4 years at the time of their death. They're relatively newlyweds. I would consider that still newlyweds.
Yeah.
They lived in a modest house in Reading, Massachusetts, which was a suburb not far out of the Boston city limits. Charles was actually a successful businessman. He was a furrier. Do you know what that is?
No.
It's like he was the general manager of Edward F. Cacus and Sons. So it was an upscale fur and clothing shop. So a furrier is like a fur salesman.
Don't love that.
I know, it's weird, right? It sounds like furry.
Yeah, that.
Well, this was a upscale clothing shop in the Fashion District on Newbury Street in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And sources say he made about $100,000 a year, which is roughly $250K in today's economy. So
Holy
pretty good
shit.
living. Yeah,
Yeah.
really good living. So Carol was a tax attorney, so she had a pretty good job as well. And the couple had been described as a Camelot couple in the media, which I wasn't sure. I looked up Camelot couple, and this was kind of the only, it's not even like a widely used name. It was the nickname given to this couple. So it's not like a term, but
That's weird.
it's really just meant they had it all. They had good jobs, they had a good home, they had a baby on the way. It was the picture of domesticity and purity is the best way I can describe
Oh.
it. So obviously, police were eager to solve this crime. You have a well-to-do couple gunned down. Well, one of them was gunned down, one was injured in cold blood, which sent the Boston community into a complete state of shock. According to Boston Magazine, quote, then Mayor Ray Flynn vowed the police would leave no stone unturned in their search for the killer, end quote. And in response, Flynn ordered more than 100 additional police officers to scour the city for the suspect. But what Flynn didn't account for is that Mission Hill, where this crime occurred, is a predominantly Black community. And in the process of trying to identify the killer, the Boston police would absolutely terrorize residents with no regard for laws, for ethics, for personal dignity. And I know how angry you get at some of these cases.
I
Buckle
do.
up.
Oh.
So here's a good spot to give you an idea of what was going on in the city back then. I mentioned the systematic racism. So here's why. So it's going to take a little history lesson, unfortunately, and I'll try to keep it brief so that it doesn't detract from the case too much. But in 1934, FDR enacted the National Housing Act, which essentially ensured that schools and public housing developments remain segregated. And before everybody flips out, it's not right, but it was 1934. So different times,
Yeah.
just mentioning history. So fast forward to the 60s when government officials made it, they made efforts to kind of end these antiquated laws. And they introduced the Racial Imbalance Act of 1965. And the legislation was passed by the Massachusetts General Court, which made segregation of public schools illegal in the state. But obviously, this created some chaos because not everyone was on board with this new law. They kind of were, how people get tied to the tradition and the way things are.
Yeah.
So there were appeals, there was pushback, and by 1974, the city was under court order to completely desegregate all public schools, causing a series of violent protests and riots, and most importantly, police brutality against Black residents. Meanwhile, the city was doing as they were instructed, and they started the compulsory busing of Black students into predominantly white schools. And this led to more than a decade of turmoil in the community. To be very blunt, rich white people didn't want poor Black kids infesting their schools.
I would like to think that in 2024, we're better now as a society, but I don't think that that's necessarily true.
You want to believe it, and then you go on social media, and it could be a picture of a bunny in a field, and there will be some kind of political comment. It's absolutely insane.
It's so true. And nothing has changed in the last X amount of years. That's the sickest part.
Yeah, it's just now you can publicize it, your inner
Yeah.
thoughts. So now that we have our finger on the pulse of the Boston in 1989, let's talk about the investigation, which was led by lead detective Peter O'Malley, or the Racist Roundup, as I'm calling it. Now, remember, Roxbury and Mission Hill and many of the surrounding areas were predominantly Black and Latino communities. And that's exactly who Charles Stuart said shot his wife, a young Black man with a raspy voice. So that's where police put their focus, but I don't think focus is the word I need to be using here. This was an all-out war on Black residents in Roxbury and Mission Hill. Officers indiscriminately utilized the old stop and frisk technique, which was still actually legal in 1989. So they weren't breaking any laws, but they did this to hundreds and hundreds of random Black men, as long as there was quote unquote reasonable suspicion to stop them or that they've committed a crime. And now look at any TikTok or YouTube video today about this subject matter, and you know how easily that statement, reasonable suspicion, can be twisted to fit any agenda.
Oh my God, I would love to know what they were deeming, again, air quotes, reasonable suspicion. Because you're Black, was that their reasonable suspicion?
That would be my guess.
Out of here.
Well, this was anything but reasonable. And in fact, it was probably the worst example of the misuse of this on a mass scale that I've ever heard. So, in the first few days, hundreds of African American men were lined up on street corners in order to pull down their pants so that officers could check them for drugs, for guns. They would have them open their underwear. They would have them drop their underwear completely. And they were looking for any excuse possible to arrest them. So 2 days after the murder, Boston City Councilor Bruce Bowling told the Boston Herald, quote, "This city is a war zone with every black man the enemy. The situation is reminiscent of the Vietnam War. The only question now is what is the body count?" End quote.
Mm.
And one resident that I was scrolling through all these newspaper articles, and one resident recalled an instance where he saw a group of about 30 young to middle-aged black men lying on the ground naked with their arms behind them. They were handcuffed. And he told the Washington Post, quote, "The scene reminded me of how they shackled slaves into ship galleys, one by one on top of each other. They were treated like animals." End quote.
Ugh, like makes my stomach hurt and I just feel icky. And it is interesting to me that this was in Boston, which is not far from Salem, which is infamous for the witch trials, which is like exactly what's happening here, right? Like
That's
this is a
exactly
witch
what it is.
hunt.
That's a very good comparison.
Yeah.
Seriously. So, in response to this public outcry, local officials even called to reinstate the death penalty, like starting with whoever committed this atrocity against this white couple. And this was selling a ton of newspapers. They were flying off the shelves, but they were all filled with this sympathetic narrative surrounding the Stuarts, completely ignoring the racial intolerance that's going on. Basically, it was a witch hunt, and residents
Mhm.
just wanted to see a black man in handcuffs and charged with this crime.
At this point, I feel like no one is interested in actual justice for the victims. Like, they just want someone to blame. And I feel like they just want anyone to pay, and they don't care who it is.
Well, 4 days after the attack, police did arrest a suspect, Alan Albee Swanson. And Swanson was a homeless man who was found squatting in an apartment building in the Mission Hill housing projects just a few blocks from where the Stewarts were found in their car. And in the apartment, police found a black sweatsuit soaking in some water in the sink. And it matched kind of Charles's description roughly. I mean, I don't think he said what color tracksuit it was, but so they
Mhm.
see sweatsuit, and they use that as a connection.
A loose connection, but okay.
Yeah. And Swanson and his girlfriend were actually wanted in connection to a breaking and entering, kind of unrelated to the attack on Stewarts. So, on the Stewarts. So, in addition to the tracksuit in his apartment, there was a newspaper clipping about the murder. So, Swanson was obviously an easy target and was arrested on the spot. In jail, Swanson was berated by guards, and word had spread that he was accused of killing a pregnant woman. So, he had to be kept separate from other inmates so he wouldn't be assaulted and or killed. He couldn't eat because guards would spit in his food, and he couldn't
Ugh.
sleep because every time they'd come by and see him sleeping, they'd rattle the cage and get him to wake up. So he was exhausted, he was hungry, he was in fear every day.
Aw.
And it was pure hell. And it got so bad that even his public defender was getting death threats to the point where the public defender's secretary would stop answering the phone. He was
Wow.
given a bulletproof vest. I'm talking about the defense attorney was given a
Wow.
bulletproof vest to wear 24/7, like even at home. Insane, right?
That's terrifying.
Right. And in case he was ambushed at home for even considering to represent Alan Swanson, the cold-blooded murderer. Nuts.
Wow. Clearly, the people of Boston are not familiar with innocent until proven guilty.
Must not be.
Mm.
So, despite Swanson's arrest, the search and frisks did not stop. Police were kicking down apartment doors in the Mission Hill housing projects, and it's estimated that roughly 150 black men per day were
What?
stopped, frisked, demanded that they turn over their ID, interrogated on the spot, because again, it was not illegal. So, police obviously abused the hell out of this loophole.
Well, and like, let's be honest, this was just a way for racist police officers to take their anger and aggression out on black men. Like, this had nothing at this point, I feel like, to do with the Stewart murder or that was just a convenient scapegoat.
Yeah,
Especially if they think they have this guy in prison and they're still doing this shit.
Right. Or maybe they knew they had a weak case against this guy. So they were like, well, let's kill two birds with one stone.
Right.
So on November 20th, about 3 weeks after the attack on Charles and Carol, Alan Swanson was released from prison because police had their sights set on Willie Bennett, and he was a resident of the Mission Hill housing projects who had previously served time for shooting a police officer. And he was arrested on a motor vehicle violation, which is how he landed on their radar to begin with. So aside from his criminal history, Bennett matched Charles's description of his wife's alleged killer. They were roughly the same age and height, and they both had raspy voices. So worse yet, while being investigated, police found a bullet in his mother's home that was the same caliber as the bullet used to kill Carol Stuart and wound Charles. So obviously I don't think a ballistic test was done because it was not, again, he didn't do it. But it was the same caliber, same type.
Right.
So Willie obviously made for a strong suspect in their eyes. And here's what sealed the deal. So on December 5th, we're talking about 6 weeks after the attack, Charles Stuart is released from the hospital. And on December 28th, he picks Willie Bennett out of a photo lineup as the man who shot him and his wife. So Willie is immediately arrested. Case closed, right?
I'm not feeling good about this.
Well, hang tight. So on January 3rd, about a week after Willie Bennett's arrest, Charles Stuart's lawyer, Jack Dawley, receives a call from Matthew Stuart, one of Charles's brothers. And he's got a bombshell to drop. He admits that the entire carjacking was a hoax, orchestrated by Charles himself as part of an insurance scam.
Wow, what a piece of shit. So
Can
just
you
like the
believe
Boston
that?
PD, Charles is a racist piece of shit. Great.
We're going to get into the details, but Charles was able to manipulate. He knew that how racist the city was, and he knew that he was stopping that car in a black community where if a rich white guy was shot there, he can frame an entire community and do whatever he wanted to do.
How can you do that as a human? Like, how can you think that that's okay? How can you do that?
These people are not human beings.
No. Like, he's a sick piece of shit.
So Jack Dawley and Matthew Stuart head to the Boston police, where Matthew agrees to tell detectives everything he knows. And in this interview, Matt says that in mid-October, Charles asked for his help with an insurance fraud scam where Matthew would basically steal Carol's jewelry from the Stuart's house and that Charles would file an insurance claim, But for whatever reason, that plan didn't work out. So that's when they came up with the idea they would rendezvous in Mission Hill on October 23rd. And Charles would throw a bag out the window of through the window of Matt's car. They'd pull up next to each other. He'd chuck a bag in there. So, and my thought is the jewelry would be in there, that Charles was just going to steal it and kind of chuck it to Matt and say it was stolen then. He was just going to facilitate it. But Matt says at the time he had no idea what was in the bag, but agreed to help his brother with this seemingly innocuous insurance scam. So according to Matthew, Charles promised to pay him $10,000 to just get rid of the bag. And the plan went as outlined, but Matt admits that when he picked up the bag, he saw someone or something slumped next to Charles in the passenger seat, but he couldn't really make out what it was. So things are a little fuzzy right now, right? It's not making a lot of sense. Well, after Charles threw Matthew the bag, which turned out to be Carol's Gucci purse, Matthew said he hid the purse temporarily in the Stuart family home and then asked his best friend, John Jack McMahon, to help him throw Carol's purse, a revolver, and her engagement ring and wallet off the Dizzy Bridge in her hometown in Revere, Massachusetts. They were going to put all this stuff in there as if things were stolen and then heave the bag off. And then they were going to put all the stuff missing. Matthew claimed he did not know Charles intended to kill his pregnant wife. That wasn't part of the deal. And he also said that he did not know Carol had been murdered until he saw it on the news the next day.
So wait, did Charles have an insurance policy on Carol, or was he just not trying to be a husband and father anymore? Because this has gone so far off track from the original plan.
Things are going to come out, but yeah, he did have an insurance policy and he got a small payout. And at the end of this story, he had petitioned a second one to turn over. She had a $100,000 policy that he does not receive by the end of this story, but he did get a little bit of money.
Ugh.
So needless to say, police are floored. They head to the Dizzy Bridge in Revere, and divers search for the bag that Matt says he lobbed into the water. And they do actually recover several of the items, bolstering Matt's claim that this hoax was what happened.
Wow.
So after this major development, then you got attorney Jack Dawley, who calls Charles Stuart and says, "Guess what your brother just told me?" You know? So he's like, "I don't think I can be associated with you anymore. You can't be my client. You're going to need a criminal lawyer."
Because you're a racist piece of shit and I don't want to be your friend anymore. Okay, bye.
That's kind of what it was. It was the goodbye. If they had texting back then, he would have texted him, new phone, who dis?
Exactly.
But Melissa, how do you think Charles reacts to this news?
I feel like he's gonna go on the run. Like, I feel like it should have been police that told him about what his brother said. Like, well, they were arresting him rather than like his lawyer almost giving him like a heads up. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that puts him ahead of the game.
But again, they don't have any evidence, just some guy saying this,
Oh, right.
So there's still, you can't just go around arresting people for things people say.
Except if they're black, then clearly it's fine in
Well,
Boston.
that's totally different. Yeah, totally different.
Assholes.
Well, so what Charles does, though, is he stays at a motel in Braintree, Massachusetts, which was about an hour from his house. And the very next morning, January 4th, 1990, he drives his car up onto the Tobin Bridge. And this is in Chelsea. And he abandons it. And he gets out and he leaps 135 feet into the Mystic River to his death. And here is a picture I'm going to put on screen of rescuers dragging his dead, lying, bloated, waterlogged carcass up onto a life raft. Enjoy that.
They should have just let him stay in the water and become like shark food. But holy shit, I did not see that coming. And what, like, why? I'm so confused. Like, why did he kill Carol? Why did he blame a made up black guy? Like, why did he do any of this? What is happening? I'm so confused.
So there,
Like,
in his car is a note. It's not a confession, but it reads, "To my family and friends, I love you very much. Thank you for standing beside me. My life has been nothing but a battle for the last 4 months. Whatever this new accusation is, it has beaten me. I've been zapped of my strength. Signed, Chuck."
fuck off, Chuck. And like, he didn't even confess. And fuck that guy for having the audacity to say whatever the new accusation is. You did this to yourself, douchebag.
I know.
And thank you for standing beside me. Look around you, bro. No one is standing next to you.
No one. No, literally no. So after Stuart leapt into the Mystic River to his death, African-American leaders in the city protested police actions and media reports during a saga they claimed cast the entire black community as criminals. And that's exactly what it did.
Exactly.
So on January 5th, 1990, one day after Stuart's suicide, Mayor Flynn announced the city owed Mission Hill an apology. And he went into Bennett's mother's house, Willie Bennett, and apologized. But the family said, "We were super disappointed because, yeah, Flynn apologized, but he only stayed for like a minute and then took off." So it was kind of like a token apology that he just felt he had to make. So who knows how genuine? I'm guessing it wasn't.
Sounds like a publicity stunt. Personally,
Well,
I think each police officer should have had to apologize as well. And then we should have made them stand on street corners and strip them down in front of everyone.
no one
How
wants
about
to see
that?
that. No one wants to see
No
that.
one wants
But
to
yeah.
see that at all. But we want to embarrass them and make them feel like shit, because they are.
In this case, I agree. So get ready for, you think this is frustrating? Get ready. So an investigation.
I'm already so annoyed.
I know. And this is years later, but an investigation was launched and it was determined that 33 people knew about Charles's involvement in this, but did
Wow.
absolutely nothing. Not only that, there were 3 witnesses who testified at a grand jury hearing that they saw someone matching Matthew Stewart's description in the back of Charles's car that night. And in addition, there was a ballistics expert who said Charles's gunshot wounds likely weren't self-inflicted. So now there's this serious question about Matthew, his brother Matthew's involvement.
All right, well, screw the people who didn't say anything. That's shitty. And like, in my case I did a couple weeks ago, the Mayo, Michigan case, like, I get why Barb didn't talk. I 100% get that. She was terrified. But like, these people just sound like assholes. And so does the brother.
Yeah, this is a story that's still, there's still a little bit more to come, but you'll see that this story is still alive and well in Boston. And there's more. And you wanted to talk about the motive. So, in the wake of Charles's suicide, police really start digging into the couple, something they should have done immediately.
Oh my God.
But they learned that while Carol couldn't have been more excited for the birth of their baby, Charles was like literally shitting his pants.
Uh-oh.
He thought that Carol would quit her job to take care of baby Christopher, and that would put a serious stranglehold on their finances. So, boo-hoo, wear a condom. You know,
Bro, you make 6 figures. You'll be fine.
well,
Like,
they must have had a lavish lifestyle, or he must have had a lavish lifestyle that he didn't think he would be able to maintain. And Charles had even spoken to several friends about needing money to open his own restaurant. And he even took a course on like buying and operating a restaurant successfully. And he
he took a
complained to
course.
at the community college.
Nice.
He complained actually to his friend David McLean that his wife refused to get an abortion, and he was pissed, and it really was going to hit him in the wallet.
He just keeps getting shittier and shittier. Like,
Well, there's also speculation that Charles was having an affair with a 22-year-old colleague, Deborah Allen, who often visited him in the hospital and kept a journal for him, kind of chronicling the things he was missing in his life. And I'm guessing number one was Deborah.
yeah, he's hitting that. But I love that he took a course. Like, well, clearly you are a restaurateur in the making, sir. What
He
an
took a master
idiot.
class
Like,
online.
I feel like he had like restauranting for dummies.
Yeah, 101, my first restaurant.
Yeah. Like,
Well, one other little nugget for you. So after his release from the hospital in December, Charles began spending money like mad. He was going ape. He bought a new Nissan Maxima. He was buying women's jewelry, including a diamond solitaire and this big gold brooch. And police talked to the jeweler who sold him those items. And the jeweler was like, here, I have a quote. Quote, "It struck me as funny because why would he be shopping? He didn't express any grief at all." End quote. So in the end, this was all about money. Go figure.
it's always about the money. Let's be real here. But like, who did he buy that stuff for? His side piece? Shouldn't the money go to his restaurant? Was that in chapter 1 of Restauranting for Dummies?
Spend all your money on your side piece.
Yes.
So obviously Charles's suicide closed this case, but Willie Bennett was never charged. He was, however, charged with armed robbery for his role in a video store burglary, which I did neglect to mention earlier. That's why he was being investigated at the time of his arrest in the Stuart case.
Oh,
And
okay.
for the video store robbery, he was sentenced to 12 to 25 years in prison and was released in 2002. And Willie did eventually sue the city for what they put him through, and he was awarded a whopping, wait for it, $12,500 for his troubles.
For ruining
And-
his life? Oh, okay, that totally makes up for it. No big.
Well, that's probably like 25 grand today. So
Still shitty.
life changing. So as of this year, actually, I looked it up. It's reported that Willie is now living alone in Boston and suffering from dementia as of
Aw.
2023. Oh, and in case you're wondering what happened to Matthew Stuart, Charles's brother, who revealed the real motive in that confession, he was indicted on 6 charges, including conspiracy, obstruction of justice, unlawful possession of a firearm, compounding a felony, and insurance fraud. And Matthew pled
Jeez.
guilty to the obstruction and fraud charges in November of 1992. He was sentenced to 3 to 5 years in prison.
All that, and he got 5 years, and then the other guy robbed a video store and got 12 to 25. Like, does anyone see the problem with that?
So Matthew was released on parole in 1997, so he got the full 5 years, 5 whole years.
Whoop whoop.
But he was arrested again soon afterward for cocaine trafficking in Revere. And those charges were later dropped for lack of evidence. And on September 3rd, 2011, Matthew was found dead of an apparent drug overdose in Heading Home. It was a homeless shelter in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Well, he was a racist shitbag like his brother, so here's me not losing sleep over him. Bye, bitch.
And before I wrap this case up, I learned while I was researching, and here's what we touched on in the beginning. HBO produced an original documentary about this just last year called Murder in Boston, Roots, Rampage, and Reckoning. And I saw parts of it, and it is freaking incredible. It really is. And I tell you this because news of the documentary sparked now Boston Mayor Michelle Wu to hold a press conference addressing the incident. And we're talking 35 years at this point.
Yeah.
And Wu was joined by members of Willie Bennett and Alan Albie Swanson's family as she again issued a formal apology on behalf of the city. Wu said, quote, "I am sorry for the pain that you've carried for so many years. What was done to you was unjust, unfair, racist, and wrong." End quote.
Yep.
Both families also received official letters of apology from the city, but Albie Swanson spoke up and was looking for more. He said, quote, "I'm still destitute as a result of the wrongful accusations and arrest. I need housing, reparations. I don't have anything. I'm still homeless and in the same position." End quote.
Oh, and he's right. And I mean, like, we know how badly these wrongful accusations can ruin someone's life. Like, we went through that in Block 3. We're going through it right now. And it's all so shitty and unfair. And I hate that Charles isn't alive to see the damage he caused. Like,
It's
what a
incredible.
cowardly little bitch. And I kind of feel like Carol's murder and the murder of the unborn baby were like forgotten in all of this, which really sucks too.
It does, and I really encourage you to watch I'm going to still watch the full documentary because it interviews some people that were directly affected by, but that endured this kind of treatment from police. And to hear their story is incredible. The one journalist that participated, his name escapes me right now, but he talked about how he was a young Latino kid and he remembers walking out of his house, walking to school, and he was a Latin student, and meaning like he was studying Latin. So he
Mm-hmm.
had the cop said, "What's in your book bag?" Push him against the wall. "What's in your book bag?" And he said,
Oh my
"A
God.
Latin book, an English book, and a notebook." It was like 3 things. And the cop pushed him around, opened his bag, and he was almost like bummed out that all he found was a Latin book, an English book, and a notebook. He was like looking for a gun or any reason. And this kid was like 14 at the time, 15, you know? So it's going to be a really incredible look at the case. And they actually had some of that Rescue 911 footage in the piece, which I'm borrowing for this because
Mm-hmm.
we're just reporting on it. But it's pretty wild stuff. And that's it. The whole doc is the part I saw is incredible.
That's and I just feel like a signed letter from the city being like, "Oh, sorry, it means nothing." Like, that doesn't make up for any of it.
And I feel like in all of this, Carol gets lost. Like you mentioned, they're forgotten. They just the
Yeah.
story is all about what this guy did to the city, how the city responded, but nobody's talking about Carol. So I'm sure the
Right.
doc does, but it feels like every article you read is just this is what happened to Carol, and now here's all the things we're mad about.
Oh my goodness.
So that is the god awful story of the murder of Carol Ann DeMaite Stewart and the
Wow.
devastation caused by one lying piece of shit's need for greed. His selfish action to cause hundreds, and hundreds of black men to literally fear for their lives every time they stepped onto the Boston city streets.
I obviously cannot imagine what that's like, but I just don't understand hating someone because of something they can't change. Like your skin color, sexual orientation, thing. Like, I don't get it. Like, for you to have that much anger inside yourself for people who have literally never done anything to you and to hate a group of people, like, that's on you. And that hate is just gonna like eat you alive.
And I feel like it's the way you were raised. It's the way, there's other factors that go into it. But
Yeah.
damn, like I'll hate you. I don't care what color you are. If you're a nice, it's like music. Good music is good music. I don't care what genre it is. You know what I mean? Good people are good people and bad
Right.
people are bad people. And both categories come in all shapes, colors, and sizes. So take that for what it's worth. But this city was messed up back in 1989. I don't know what it's like today, but it better not be anything like that, or I have no reason to go there. Like I don't want to go there.
No, and you know what? I would like to think that, those police officers felt no, because they didn't feel bad, but like I'd
I didn't
like
feel
to
bad.
think that like I hope that there was change though. I hope that I don't know, they had to go to courses, something.
Well, it's funny because when Mayor Wu this was just last year, she held this press conference.
Yeah.
I mean, you're dredging it all up again. And yes, you're issuing an apology, but you're also bringing up all those memories, and the people that were affected by it are going to feel certain ways.
Absolutely. I mean, that's such a dark stain like on Boston's history, and they should be
Right.
ashamed.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, you told me when you were looking up 1989 facts, what'd you find in Boston?
Oh my gosh, I typed in Boston 1989 and like the first 3 pages of Google were all about this. Like this is how big of a deal this was.
Hmm. Yep. Yeah, I did a lot of research on this kind of mandatory busing of minorities into public schools, and it's the people were legit outraged. It caused riots. So many people were injured and hurt and beaten by police because of their feelings.
That's so wild. Like everyone's a human.
Right. But I've never seen an instance like this where an entire community was a suspect just for being black.
It's disgusting.
Yeah. Let us know what you think, you guys. I was excited to bring you that story because I was horrified by what I was reading. And the more I read, the more angry I got.
No, I'm glad you covered it because I think that sometimes people don't cover stories like this because they don't want to start controversy. They just don't want to have to think about it. I think that happens a lot in stories like this, but we
I agree.
can't pretend that it didn't happen.
Right. It did.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's so disappointing. And like I said, like I'd like to think things are better, but I don't really know that they are. So, you know
Right.
what? Everyone, I mean, anyone who's listening is awesome and not racist. But if by chance you are, do better. Just do better. Don't be so shitty.
And R.I.P. Carol Stuart and baby Christopher. Like they
Yeah,
don't want to get overlooked.
that's a shame. Well, let us know what you think about this case. You can hit us up on our socials, Facebook, Insta, TikTok at Murder Unscripted. You can email us, murderunscriptedpod@gmail.com. You can look at our website, murderunscriptedpod.com. Throw in a bunch of W's at the beginning, however many you want. And we will see you next week where we cover a survivor story.
I love those.
That one's it's going to make you mad though, guys. For a
They all
different
make me
reason
mad.
than today.
Why are we
But
just mad every week?
because we hate criminals and racist people.
It's true. We do.
So until next week, do better. Everybody do better. And remember, perverts don't wear signs that say they're perverts.
That's the only time segregation should be allowed. Everybody who's got a pervert sign, Pervert Island with you.
Seriously.
Bye. Doctors did perform an emergency C-section, and they were able to pull out the baby, which was named Christopher William. And he was about 9 months premature. Sorry, that would not even be a baby. He was about 9 weeks.
That's very premature.
Good Lord. So Charles tells the officers that he and his wife spent the evening at prenatal birthing class, so pre-Cana classes. I guess they're called Lamaze, right? Pre-Cana.
Yeah.
Pre-Cana is Catholicism.
I just don't understand hating someone because of something they can't change. Like your skin color, your sexual orientation, thing. Like, I don't get it. Like, I hate people because they're ugly.
That's nice. That's nice. Charles was a successful businessman. He was a furry, actually.
Whoa!
A furrier.
I was like, you're right. I did not see that coming.
There were not furries in 1989, I don't think.
Oh my god. We don't kink shame here, Ed.